The leader's skin darkened further, now a shade of deep navy, as he seethed. "The Galactic Council hereby declares war on Earth and all human territories," he declared. His voice shook with fury, laced with the finality of the proclamation. The chamber erupted. The murmurs were drowned out by various alien sounds, some gurgling, others hissing, and a few vibrating at frequencies too low to be heard by human ears. For a fleeting moment, Walker allowed himself a glance around the chamber. His eyes moved lazily over the alien forms, the floating gas clouds, the towering insectoids, the insectoid diplomats with their chitinous exoskeletons glinting in the plasma light. Every eye was fixed on him. He felt their focus, but not the threat. He slid his phone back into his pocket, his movements languid. Okay, but can we speed this up? I'm seriously running late." His words felt like a slap in the face to the council, but they were delivered with such nonchalance that no one could quite comprehend the insult, only that it existed. The leader, now trembling with rage, slammed his fist down on the podium. The shockwave rattled the air, stirring the atmosphere around them. "You mock us now," he sneered, "but we will crush your civilization. We'll block your worlds with our combined fleets. Our armies will—" Yeah. Walker waved his hand dismissively. He leaned back slightly, looking as though he might drift off to sleep at any moment. "Look, send the paperwork to our office. Someone in legal will look it over when they get a chance." His voice dropped to a near whisper, almost affectionate. "They're fast, don't worry." The silence in the room thickened, suffocating the council in its own frustration. The leader's mouth opened, but no words came out. His fury had left him mute for a moment. He slammed his fist on the podium once more, the sharp sound reverberating like a gunshot in the air. The light in the chamber seemed to flicker at the impact. "Ambassador, this is no trivial matter," the leader managed to choke out, his voice tightening with every word. "This is war. We will—" "Yeah, sure," Walker interrupted. "But let's keep it formal, okay? I don't want to be charged for a late cancellation." He began walking toward the exit, completely unbothered by the tension thickening behind him. He glanced over his shoulder, offering a lazy grin. "Be sure to file the crushing in triplicate, all right? Have a good one, guys." His tone was casual, as if he were leaving a coffee shop, not a galactic war council. As he passed through the crystal doors, they slid shut with a sharp hiss. The room was left in stunned silence. The only sound now was the faint buzz of energy emanating from the plasma displays above, casting long, sharp shadows across the chamber. Back on Earth, the news was playing on every screen in Times Square. The holographic newscaster's voice was brisk, dismissive. "In other news, the Galactic Council has apparently declared war on Earth today. And now, sports. The Yankees pulled off an amazing comeback in their game against—" A group of teenagers, more focused on their phones than the intergalactic conflict unfolding above them, stopped for a selfie. They grinned into the camera, their fingers raised in peace signs as the alien ships drifted ominously in the sky behind them. The ship's imposing silhouette loomed over them, but to them, it was just another backdrop, another opportunity for a post. In the UN building, a briefing was underway. A few diplomats, scattered around a large conference table, exchanged worried glances when the screen flickered to life. Walker's face appeared, calmly eating a sandwich in the back of his shuttle. "So, they really declared war?" the UN Security Council head asked, chewing her food absent-mindedly. "Yep," Walker replied, adjusting his tie, his fingers brushing the fabric. "Should be hitting your inbox soon. Just wanted to let you know." "Great," the Security Council head mumbled. "We'll add it to the agenda for next month's meeting." She wiped some mayo off her chin and continued to eat, unfazed. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbit, civilian ships continued their day-to-day business. Mining ships, freighters, and cruise liners moved smoothly through the void, unfazed by the declaration of war. News of the galactic conflict hadn't even reached their systems, and most captains were busy updating insurance policies or coordinating shipping routes. Even the smallest vessels, unarmed and unprepared, carried on like they did every other cycle. A massive alien warship approached one of these ships, cutting through the vast distance between worlds. "You are now entering a war zone," An alien captain's voice crackled through the intercom. "Return to Earth immediately." "Thank you for contacting Anderson Mining Corp." An automated voice responded, unaffected. "Your call is important to us. Please hold for the next available representative." The alien captain, stunned, stared at his communications panel. The cheerful hold music played on, a jarring juxtaposition to the war they were about to start. And so began the war, one that Earth hardly noticed at first, but one that would come to shape the galaxy's future in ways no one, not even the aliens, could have predicted. The doors to the crystal chamber hissed shut behind James Walker, sealing off the alien assembly. As the quiet reverberated through the chamber, Walker's confident strides slowed as he passed through the dimly lit hallways. His footsteps echoed softly against the cold, smooth floors, a sharp contrast to the tension left behind in the council room. The space around him felt alive with the kind of energy that clung to the air, like the seconds before a storm breaks. Despite the monumental declaration, Walker remained unaffected. He'd faced worse. He'd seen it before, all of it. His shuttle awaited just outside, its sleek design shimmering in the sunlight that filtered through the clear dome. A few steps in, the sharp clink of metal from his polished shoes briefly collided with the hum of the automated shuttle systems. The whir of the doors sealing behind him was crisp, final. Walker dropped into the plush seat, the leather creaking under his weight as his fingers traced the edge of the heads-up display, which flickered to life instantly. "Full data stream on Earth's response," he muttered as he scanned the screen. There was nothing to worry about, not yet. Earth was silent, outwardly at least. No military response, no panic in the streets. Just the steady hum of everyday life. His eyes slid down the incoming reports, unreadable, and then to the food tray at his side. Standard shuttle cuisine. Walker pressed a button, and the simple meal slid effortlessly into his hands. The aroma was faint but familiar, the sort of thing that reminded him of long flights. Like home. The shuttle lurched, and the cabin shifted slightly, the momentary discomfort more of a reflex than anything significant. A slight movement caught Walker's eye as a light flickered on the far wall, a pulsing alert that flashed across the laser plasma displays mounted on either side of his seat. The briefing had arrived. "Play it," Walker ordered, his voice calm, though it carried a tinge of anticipation. A holographic projection flared to life above the console, but it wasn't a hologram. It was a sharply detailed 3D scan, illuminated by the shuttle's plasma systems. Earth's military response was finally being calculated, but what Walker saw sent a subtle pulse of tension through him. A map of Earth's orbit, ships arrayed in defensive formations, high-tech crafts, sleek and silent, some still under construction. Yet no one had acted. No alarms blared. The war hadn't reached Earth's streets. Not yet. "Status on Earth's military readiness?" he asked, the words spilling from his lips with a slight impatience. "Stagnant," the voice of the AI responded, an unblinking machine clarity. "Preparedness reports show minimal strategic deployment outside routine operations. Routine engagement only. No immediate changes." Walker leaned back in his seat, his hands folded on his lap. The Council's declaration had struck no immediate terror into humanity. Earth, as always, was preoccupied with its own distractions. He stared at the screen, watching as a number of civilian vessels drifted lazily around Earth's orbit, oblivious to the coming storm. A few tourists, their vessels adorned with advertisements for luxury vacations and space cruises, floated by, smiling through windows, unaware. The vast expanse of humanity's reach, a collective, distracted indifference. As his shuttle shot into the black, streaks of plasma fires painted the cabin in shifting tones of violet and gold. The journey to Earth's capital quick and silent. The hum of the shuttle's engine barely reached his ears, muffled beneath layers of protocol and procedure. The sleek metal hull held nothing but the rush of his thoughts as Earth's cities glowed in the distance. But then a faint vibration pulled him from his thoughts. The walls of the shuttle shook with a soft tremor, a whisper of something out there beyond the reach of the planet's fragile atmosphere. The sensation grew sharper, closer. Walker's fingers moved to the laser plasma display again, this time running across live satellite feeds showing massive ships now entering Earth space. The Council had begun to move in earnest. The sensation of dread tugged at Walker. An instinctive surge of tension as the first signs of a conflict he'd long foreseen began to unfold. He looked out the window, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. A reminder of how minuscule and fragile human existence was in the grander expanse of the universe. Yet Earth had managed to survive, perhaps because it didn't overthink its power, or because its greatest strength lay in underestimation. Walker didn't know, but he wasn't concerned with what others thought now. The cabin doors hissed open as Walker stepped out into the bustling military complex. The sounds of human activity enveloped him, metal clanging against metal, hurried voices in low tones, the creak of heavy-duty trucks as they passed by. Officers moved with purpose, but there was an underlying unease, something faint but tangible beneath their confident steps. Walker made his way through the tight corridors to a private briefing room. "Status report," he commanded the room's internal system. The laser plasma display hummed to life above him. The map of Earth and its surrounding orbits was still calm, but deep within the complex, the military was preparing, strategic plans unfolding quietly. His team had been working for months on an unorthodox strategy, and now it would come into play. Walker's focus sharpened, his thoughts cutting through the noise of the war's early onset. Earth's calm, calculated resistance was not what the Council had expected. "We have their moves mapped out," said General Varric Ton, his voice low, gravelly. He turned to the board where simulations danced, alien fleets, estimated movement vectors, their tactics. He tapped one of the holographic squares, bringing up a list of potential targets. "But they won't be prepared for our counters. We have to move fast." Walker nodded. His gaze settled on the figures that surrounded him, his officers, the advisors, those that would carry the weight of Earth's resistance in the coming weeks. None of them spoke of victory yet. There was no room for pride. This was a war, not a show of bravado. It was calculated, brutal, and most of all, silent. "Keep their fleets distracted," Walker finally said, his words as cold as the steel walls surrounding them. "We engage at a distance, mislead them. They think we're unprepared. Let's keep it that way. But we're ready." The quiet intensity of his words settled over the group. They all knew their roles, but there was an unspoken understanding between them. This was just the beginning. The Council's fleets were out there, but their movements were already being manipulated. Their expectations were about to be shattered. But still, no one had realized how deeply they were being misled. Earth had a plan, yes, but there was something even deeper, something that would take time to unfold. The greatest advantage of all lay in the uncertainty. Humanity was never predictable, and neither were its moves. Walker paused for a moment, staring out at the city beyond. His reflection mirrored on the glass, distorted by the landscape behind him. This wasn't about defeating the Council with brute force. It was about exploiting their greatest flaw, their overconfidence. The shuttle's path curved toward Earth's capital, where the final pieces of the strategy were set to fall into place. The future would be written in the sharp lines of calculated moves, each step, each breath carefully plotted. Nothing would unfold exactly as the Council believed. The first crack of the war came quietly, too quietly. It wasn't the shudder of distant artillery or the blinding flash of a ship's final moments. No, the war began with a simple signal, a ripple in the vast digital sea. The Council's fleet had slipped into Earth's outer orbit under the radar, cloaked by their state-of-the-art systems. And yet, Earth's defenses, set to react, but not yet expecting such an early strike, were already shifting. Walker had been in the war room, his attention locked onto the laser plasma display in front of him. The team around him moved like clockwork, analyzing data, adjusting tactics, preparing for the inevitable. His eyes scanned the numbers quickly, detailed calculations flashing rapidly on the screen, every blinking symbol carrying the weight of an uncertain future. 6 ships, General Varric Ton muttered, his hand hovering over the board as more data filtered in. But no visible weapons. They're not here to fight yet. Walker's lips curled into a thin smile. They think they have the element of surprise. They're wrong. The screen shifted, and suddenly the faint glint of alien ships began to materialize, slipping from their cloaks with terrifying precision. A handful of warships, each monstrous in size, drifted closer to Earth's inner atmosphere, weapons systems cloaked, engines humming quietly as they prepared to breach. But Earth's preparations weren't visible, not yet. The fleets were biding their time, waiting for the signal. And then, as though on cue, the first crack of gunfire split the void, a jarring light that momentarily blinded the battlefield. A flurry of explosions followed, and the silence shattered. The first ship fell, taken by a hidden Earth ship that had silently awaited this moment. From the bridge of the defense station, Varric Dren watched the explosions ripple across the laser plasma screens as the alien ship dissolved into a shower of sparks and twisted metal. "Strike now! Hit them hard!" Varric's voice was low but firm. "They won't expect us to engage so soon." The room tensed. Every officer, every strategist, felt the weight of the moment. They had all known this was coming, but no one could have predicted how quickly it would ignite. The alien ships had been expecting Earth to stagger, to cower in fear beneath the overwhelming might of the Galactic Council. Instead, the humans had planned for this moment, silently and with deadly intent. As the first few ships dissolved into the black, the rest of the fleet hesitated, the weight of the Council's own overconfidence biting into their strategies. "Deploy the fighters," Varric ordered, his voice now steady and commanding. The officers around him moved swiftly, adjusting controls, relaying commands with practiced ease. Outside, in the cold vastness, the battle began in earnest. Earth's fighters launched from their hidden positions, sleek and fast, cutting through the space between planets like a storm. Varric's ships shot forward, weaving through the debris of their fallen enemies, preparing for the next wave. The once confident alien ships were already starting to fracture under the weight of Earth's retaliation. Back on the surface, the people of Earth had no idea the war had begun. The streets of the capital remained bustling, the markets humming with life, unaware that in the cold expanse of space, humanity's fate was being rewritten. "Get the ion cannons online," Varric barked. "We need to strike before they regroup." The room hummed with activity as weapon systems powered up. Earth's military had been preparing for a long, drawn-out battle, but the Council's initial underestimation of human resilience had proven to be their first fatal error. Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm broke through the air, slicing through the tension. The display flickered with new data. More Council ships, larger than the first, now closing in on Earth's orbital defenses. A new fleet was arriving. "They're pushing harder now," General Tan noted. "This is only the beginning." The screen shifted again and Varric's eyes narrowed. A new ship design appeared, one that hadn't been accounted for in their initial intel. A monstrous beast of metal and energy, its size dwarfing even Earth's most powerful warships. The alien ship was now mere miles away, closing fast. There was no room for retreat, no time for more calculations. Varric's finger hovered over the command button, his gaze unwavering as he watched the enemy vessel approach. "Engage," he said simply. "Now." The cannons fired. The space around Earth lit up with the fury of 1,000 weapons. Red and yellow plasma streams cut through the dark, bright bursts filling the screen as Earth's ships leaped into battle. The first few strikes were sharp and effective, hitting the alien fleet with precision, but the larger ships retaliated quickly, their shields deflecting the shots, the impact reverberating through the decks. Walker watched from the observation bay, his fingers tapping against the cold glass. His expression remained stoic as he observed the chaos unfolding above the planet. The war had been inevitable, but now it was real, and it was only a matter of time before the tides turned. "Deploy the drones," Varric commanded. "We need to keep their forces scattered. Get the rest of their fleet into disarray. I want them off balance." The drones were released, swarming like a cloud of metal wasps. They shot forward, disorienting the enemy fleet with a flurry of rapid maneuvers and electronic warfare tactics. The Council's ships struggled to regroup, the sudden aggression catching them off guard. The air in the command center was thick with focus, the hum of equipment the only sound breaking the stillness. Varek's fingers danced across the control panel as he adjusted the ship's trajectory. The lasers fired again, ripping through space with unstoppable force. One of the larger alien ships was struck in a critical area. Sparks shot from its hull and then it exploded, an eruption of light that temporarily blinded the battle. Varek's team remained poised, their movements fluid as they worked in tandem to cripple the rest of the fleet. Each maneuver was deliberate, calculated, a series of preordained steps that they'd prepared for in secrecy. The battle was violent, the ships lighting up like fireflies in a storm. Yet beneath the chaos, Varek felt a growing unease, a sense that something deeper was unfolding. The alien ships were beginning to retreat, but there was no telling yet if it was a strategic withdrawal or a feigned weakness. "Keep pushing forward," Varek muttered under his breath. He turned to General Tan. "Keep their momentum broken. Don't give them a chance to regroup." Tan nodded, a single line of sweat dripping down his temple, but his voice was steady. "Understood. We'll make them pay for underestimating us." Yet, as the battle raged on, there remained a silent undercurrent. The fight was brutal, but it was not the true war. The real test still lay ahead. Walker's earlier nonchalance seemed misplaced now. This wasn't a simple skirmish. This was only the beginning. The room fell into a tense silence as the drones tore through another enemy ship. But Walker's thoughts had already drifted ahead. They'd won this round. But there was something looming. Something in the silence of the retreating enemy that didn't sit right. The war had only just begun, but the Council wasn't done yet. Neither was Earth. And Walker knew, as the plasma fire died down, that the real fight was still coming. What they'd seen so far? A distraction. The Council had only just begun to show their hand. In the stillness that followed the chaos, Varek's eyes met Walker's across the control room, and the understanding between them was immediate. Something darker was coming, and the next move would be theirs. The battle seemed to hang suspended in the void, the echoes of destruction still vibrating through the vacuum of space. Earth's fleet had driven the Council's ships back, just for now. The enemy had retreated to regroup, but Walker could sense it, like the pause before a storm. A rare moment of silence stretched, then a sharp ping from his heads-up display broke the stillness. "Status report," he muttered, his gaze fixed on the flashing alerts. The plasma display flared to life, revealing the aftermath of the engagement. Burning debris, shattered hulls, and a handful of remaining alien ships struggling to regain control. Yet beneath the tangible chaos, something else gnawed at him, an instinct telling him that the real fight was yet to come. "We've crippled their initial advance," General Varek Tan said, his fingers darting across a control panel, his voice low but steady. "But they've withdrawn to a safe distance. It's not over." Walker nodded, but his mind raced. This wasn't a typical retreat. The Council was calculating their next move, and they had the luxury of being able to outnumber Earth, to regroup and come back stronger. Earth had thrown a punch, but the true counterattack wasn't going to come from brute force. It would be something deeper, something more insidious, and Walker had no intention of letting the Council control the next move. The soft tap of fingers on metal filled the room as officers moved swiftly through their assignments. But it wasn't the urgency that gripped Walker's attention. It was the silence of the moment, the feeling of waiting for something significant that had yet to be revealed. "Are you seeing this?" Varek said suddenly, his voice tight, pulling Walker's focus back to the laser plasma display. The screen blinked, data streaming in from deep space. It's not just the Council pulling back. They're recalibrating, analyzing our defense strategy. "What are they planning?" Walker's voice was sharp now, cutting through the stillness of the command room. A faint pulse of unease began to build in his chest. "They've deployed a new class of ships, larger than the first ones we faced," Varek said. "They're not here for small skirmishes. They're organizing a large-scale offensive. We have moments, maybe less." Walker leaned forward, the chill of the room seeping into his bones, but it didn't match the tight knot in his gut. He scanned the data on the display, the numbers and coordinates flashing faster than his brain could catch up. His fingers hovered over the console, but he didn't immediately react. There was no room for panic, no space for hasty decisions. They've been planning this for far longer than we expected. We need to stop them before they realize how unprepared we are, Walker said quietly, but with a certainty that filled the room. He turned to face his team, each of them poised and ready, but not quite understanding what was coming next. But we won't fight them the way they expect us to. The shift in the air was subtle, but it was enough. Walker's eyes narrowed, focusing on the map now filling the display. The Council's movements were being tracked, but there was a flaw in their positioning. A hesitation. Something didn't align with the enemy's usual tactics. Walker grinned to himself, a flash of realization flickering in his mind. "Prepare the drones," he ordered, the words clipped and purposeful. "I want to lead them on, mislead them. We don't attack head-on. We confuse them. Let them think we're weak." General Tan raised an eyebrow, unsure but trusting. "Deception?" "Exactly. The moment they think we've shown our cards, we turn the game on them." Walker's voice grew colder. "They're about to make a mistake." As Varric began to issue orders, Walker's eyes flicked to the far side of the room, where a smaller monitor displayed the status of Earth's civilian operations. Life on the surface seemed far removed from the chaos unfolding in orbit. The cities were alive, the streets bustling. Even the slightest hint of war hadn't quite reached the people yet. "Alert the orbital defenses," Walker continued. "Tell them to stay hidden. No need for public panic. We're the unknown variable. Let the Council think they know everything." Outside the windows of the command room, space was quiet, but it was an unsettling calm. The ships, the vast metallic giants that had been Earth's first defense, now drifted through space in their quiet readiness, concealed by careful timing and hidden alliances. Walker felt the cold breath of strategy at his back. His next move would set everything into motion. "Deploy countermeasures! Activate Phase 2! Walker's voice had become commanding, unwavering. "We let them take the bait, then we hit them with everything we've got. This is our first real strike, and I intend to make it count." "Understood." General Tan gave a sharp nod, his fingers tapping rapidly on the controls. The tension in the air thickened, like the final beat before a drum roll. The countdown to the next phase of the operation had begun, and Walker was at the heart of it. But the deeper he delved into the tactics, the more unsettling the feeling grew. A sense that the Council had already anticipated this. "Varric, are you sure this strategy will hold?" Walker asked, his voice quieter now, the weight of the question bearing down on him. "What if they have a backup plan?" Tan hesitated, a brief flicker of doubt passing over his face before he responded. "I'm not certain, but we don't have the luxury of time to second-guess now." The data on the screens began to change. Alien ships were moving again, faster now, closing the gap between Earth's forces and their own offensive. The map of space on the plasma display shifted, drawing lines between the two fleets. Earth ships were carefully concealed, appearing to make way for the incoming Council forces. It was a trap. Walker's heart pounded in his chest, but his face remained calm, composed. He didn't speak again until the silence in the room grew deafening. The entire fleet, Earth's most capable ships, remained locked in place, waiting, holding, all while the Council's forces advanced. "They think we're hiding," Walker murmured, his eyes narrowing in disbelief. "And they're about to find out they're wrong." The seconds ticked down, a new pressure mounting. Walker felt the unmistakable tension building within him, the sharp, unyielding pull of a moment about to break. The Council had underestimated humanity's ability to deceive and adapt. This was no longer just about ships and weapons. This was a war of the mind, a strategy that, when pulled off, would cripple the Council's command. Outside, the first ship of the Council's new offensive fleet neared, and Walker's breath held in his chest. His fingers tightened around the armrests, waiting. In that moment, he knew. This wasn't just a war. This was humanity's proving ground. And the real battle was about to begin. The quiet in the command center was suffocating, thick with the anticipation of something just beyond reach. Walker's fingers tapped against the edge of his console, the sharp sound breaking the silence only for a moment. Every officer in the room was watching, waiting for the inevitable strike that would bring the conflict to its next phase. The laser plasma displays were alive with activity, tracking the movements of the alien ships, noting their patterns, their behaviors. Each new shift of coordinates sent ripples through the tense air. The calm before the storm had stretched too long. The Council's fleet had stopped retreating. They were circling, as though waiting for Earth to make a move, but they weren't attacking yet. The warships loomed in the distance like predatory shadows. Walker could feel it. This was the moment when everything would break wide open. "Where are they?" Varek's voice cut through the room, low and controlled. He stood at the center of the room, his eyes scanning the screens, the map of Earth's orbital defenses unfolding on every available display. "Movement detected in Sector 12, an officer reported, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data. "It's subtle, but they're coming in fast. They're positioning themselves for a coordinated strike." Walker's gaze shifted to the heads-up display. Lines of data scrolled in rapid succession, marking the aliens' approach. But they weren't just heading toward Earth's fleet. No, this wasn't an ordinary assault. The enemy ships were spreading out, weaving between the planets, attempting to outflank Earth's forces. They weren't coming in from a single direction. They were positioning themselves for something larger, more insidious. "General, I want the ion cannons ready. Now," Walker ordered, his voice low but sharp. The tension in the room heightened, and everyone moved quickly to prepare, adjusting control panels and fine-tuning targeting systems. "We don't have much time," Varek muttered, stepping closer to the plasma display. The image of the alien fleet was now clearer, their movements slowing as they gathered strength. The Council wasn't just sending a single wave of attack ships. They were building a network, surrounding Earth's defenses, closing in from all angles. The laser plasma screens above flickered slightly as the strategy began to unfold on the maps. Earth's forces, small and agile, were dotted across the screen, neatly arrayed in a defensive pattern, trying to create a shell. But the incoming fleet was anything but simple. The ships had moved too swiftly, too strategically. Their methods had shifted since the initial engagement, their desperation now replaced by a calculated precision. "They're trying to trap us," Walker muttered under his breath, his gaze locked on the approaching ships. "They think we're too scattered to mount a proper defense. They're trying to corner us." The silence in the room grew heavy again. The quiet urgency of the situation was palpable. The officers knew, even before the first shot was fired, that this battle would not go the way the Council had planned. The aliens might have been calculating, but they were about to be outsmarted. "Get the drones in position," Varek snapped. "We hit them on the flanks, now." Earth's drones shot from their hidden positions, sleek, fast, and deadly, darting toward the alien ships in a flurry of motion. Walker's finger hovered above the command panel as the ships positioned themselves, ready for the next phase of attack. The drones were designed for speed and agility, and they had been programmed to confuse, mislead, and disrupt the enemy's systems. Their arrival was swift, sharp, like an unexpected punch in the gut. The enemy fleet, taken off guard by the sudden surge, scattered. The drones moved through the gap, creating confusion and disarray among the Council's formations. The alien ship's defenses flared, firing back in retaliation, but the drones were too quick, too unpredictable. "Do you see it?" Walker asked, his voice steady as his eyes darted over the displays, following the scattered movements. "They're reacting, but not fast enough." The alien ships were struggling to regain their formation, a telltale sign that their initial confidence was starting to waver. The Council's overwhelming superiority was starting to feel less so, their ships unable to keep up with the nimble strikes from Earth's forces. But just as the tide seemed to shift, something else flashed across the display. A new fleet signature moving in from behind the main alien force. Walker froze. "Another fleet?" he muttered. The incoming ships were massive, a secondary force prepared to break the lines. Earth had only just begun to take advantage of the first distraction, and now the Council was coming in with everything they had. Varek's eyes darkened. "They're not going to back off now. This is the real assault." Prepare the countermeasures, Walker ordered, his tone sharpening with authority. We cannot let them surround us. The room erupted into action. Officers scrambled to their stations, recalibrating Earth's counter-strategy on the fly. The second wave of Council ships was massive, their weapon systems primed, their shields locked into defensive positions. Earth's forces were still recovering from the initial assault, and the sudden arrival of the Second Fleet threatened to crush them under its weight. "Fire the first volley!" Varek barked, his fingers flying across the console as he coordinated the attack. The ion cannons unleashed their destructive power, sending bolts of searing energy toward the incoming ships. The bolts of plasma cut through the darkness of space, striking with incredible force, but it wasn't enough to fully breach the alien fleet's defenses. They were strong, too well prepared. "Stay on them," Walker growled. "We break their line, or they break us." The laser plasma displays flickered violently as the space around them filled with explosions, the bright flashes of light illuminating the battlefield like the sudden strike of lightning. Earth's forces fought back fiercely, but the aliens were not yet willing to admit defeat. Their ships were falling, but they were also regrouping, their larger vessels sending reinforcements faster than Earth's fighters could respond. In the midst of the chaos, a low rumble seemed to resonate through the ship's hull, a ripple of energy that shook the station to its core. The screens went dark for a fraction of a second, the familiar maps of Earth's orbit gone, replaced by a sudden surge of static. The systems were rebooting, the interference momentarily causing a lapse in communication. "What happened?" Varek snapped, his voice edged with tension. "Sabotage," came the officer's terse response. "They found our weak points." Walker's gaze locked onto the now blurred map, the alien ships closing in on Earth's remaining defenses. The second wave had shifted tactics, moving faster than they'd anticipated, and Earth's forces were now locked in a game of cat and mouse. The lines between victory and defeat had blurred into an uncertain horizon. "Re-establish contact," Walker said through gritted teeth. "We hold them off. No retreat, no surrender." The room held its breath as the screens flickered back to life. The message was clear. Earth had shown its hand, but the Council had not yet revealed theirs. The real question was whether Earth could keep the pressure on long enough to force their enemy to reveal their final strategy. Walker wasn't sure yet, but he knew one thing for certain: the next move would make all the difference. The war was no longer just about defeating the enemy. It was about outsmarting them. And Walker had no intention of losing this gamble. The air in the command center was thick with tension, each second stretching into eternity as Walker's fingers hovered just above the control panel. The energy in the room buzzed with urgency, but there was something deeper, something unsettling, like the quiet before an avalanche. The Council's second wave had faltered for a moment, but Walker knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped. The plasma displays flickered with incoming data, showing multiple alien ships retreating slightly, only to reassemble into an even larger, more menacing formation. "Where are their reinforcements coming from?" Varek's voice broke the silence, a sharp edge of frustration creeping into his tone. "They're using their larger vessels as shields," an officer replied, scanning the feeds. "Their smaller ships are darting between them, drawing us into their range." The battlefield had become a deadly chessboard, each move more desperate than the last. Earth's forces had struck hard, but the alien ships were adapting quickly, countering with calculated precision. The heat of battle was rising. Walker could feel it in the pit of his stomach, a knot of anticipation and dread. This wasn't going to be easy, not by a long shot. "Deploy the decoys," Walker commanded. His voice was firm, unshaken despite the shifting chaos. "Let's scatter their formation, now!" The decoys were launched in a flurry, sleek and deceptive, mimicking the readings of Earth's defense ships. The alien fleet, already uneasy, hesitated. For a moment, their weapon systems locked onto the false signatures, and Earth's ships had a momentary advantage. "Now!" Varek shouted, as the real ships surged forward in a coordinated attack. Plasma bolts lit up the darkness of space, searing through the cold void and connecting with the alien hulls. For a brief moment the battle seemed to pause as the alien ships reeled from the unexpected strike, but Walker knew it wouldn't last. We're buying time, Walker said, his eyes glued to the shifting formations. We need to push them back before they recover. The ion cannons fired in a rapid, controlled burst, their brilliant arcs of blue energy slicing through space, striking two ships directly. There was an explosion, a burst of light that blinded the laser plasma displays for a split second. Then the glow faded, leaving behind debris. But the Council wasn't finished. Another wave, larger this time, formed and advanced, unyielding. Shields are weakening, Varric reported, his voice strained. We can't hold them off forever. Walker's mind raced, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a vice. This was it. The Council was testing Earth's limits. He glanced at the heads-up display, tracking the movement of the enemy fleet, calculating their next strike. The Council had underestimated Earth's capacity for resistance, but now they were about to witness humanity's greatest weapon, adaptability. Status on Earth's military readiness? Walker asked, his voice almost casual, as if the battle wasn't raging just outside. On standby, another officer replied. No more surprises on the surface, but they're ready to respond when we give the signal. Walker nodded, a flicker of something almost resembling satisfaction crossing his face. Earth's reserves were still intact. This was far from over. Get me the coordinates on the enemy command ship, Walker ordered. We're going for the heart of the fleet. Varric's eyes widened. You're not... I am. Walker cut him off. It's the only way. We cut off their command structure, and their cohesion falls apart. The command ship was massive, a hulking fortress of metal and energy, but its size was also its weakness. Walker knew the Council would never expect them to target it directly. The fight wasn't just about destruction. It was about dismantling the Council's unity, breaking the illusion of invulnerability. Varric looked at him, a mix of concern and respect in his eyes. You think they'll fall for it? They don't have a choice, Walker replied with a steely determination, his voice sharpening like a knife's edge. We've got one shot. Make it count. As the fleet shifted into position, Earth's forces maneuvered with an almost unsettling fluidity, the smaller ships darting between the gaps in the alien fleet. Their speed and unpredictability were their greatest strengths, and the Council couldn't seem to catch up. The alien ships tried to regroup, sending waves of retaliatory fire, but Earth's ships danced through the chaos, evading each strike with calculated grace. On my mark, Walker ordered. The moment hung in the air, the pressure building like a crescendo. Everything depended on this. The alien ships were still too close to each other, their weapon systems still locked onto the decoys and the smaller Earth ships. They were distracted, vulnerable. Now! Walker's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. Earth's ships surged forward in perfect unison, their ion cannons firing with a synchronized intensity. The plasma displays flickered as the energy beams tore through the enemy fleet, striking the weak points on the command ship's hull. A series of explosions erupted, the first wave tearing through its outer shields. But the command ship wasn't going down without a fight. The alien vessel unleashed a barrage of counterfire, its weapons shaking the space around it, sending shock waves through the battlefield. Earth's ships were pushed back, but they didn't stop. They circled, regrouped, and prepared for another strike. We're in the clear, Varric said, his voice still tense but carrying the edge of triumph. They didn't expect us to push that far. But just as Earth's forces prepared for the final blow, a chilling realization settled over the room. The command ship wasn't just a warship, it was a decoy. The real threat was coming from another direction. The plasma displays flared again, this time showing an unexpected movement. A fleet of smaller, more agile alien ships had emerged from a hidden sector, positioned perfectly to cut off Earth's retreat. Ambush, Walker muttered under his breath. They knew we'd go for the command ship. Varric's face hardened. What now? Walker straightened, his eyes flicking over the data. We don't retreat. We double down. The enemy had just played their hand, but so had Earth. The stakes had changed in an instant. Walker could feel the shift in the air. The war was no longer just about battles won or lost. It was about strategy, deception, and staying one step ahead. We strike their supply lines, Walker said, his voice steady. a plan already forming in his mind. We take away their fuel, their power, their ability to fight. Then we finish this. The tension in the command center was palpable. The glow of the laser plasma displays illuminated the darkened room, casting an eerie light over the faces of the officers. The hum of the systems provided the only sound, cutting through the silence that had settled over the crew. The battle had reached a critical point. Earth's forces had struck at the heart of the alien fleet, but the victory was far from certain. Walker's mind raced through calculations, adjusting and adapting as new data poured in from the field. "We've disrupted their supply lines," Varric said, his voice tense but laced with a strange sense of hope. The information from the command ship's tactical data had been transmitted, and Earth's forces had begun to pick apart the Council's infrastructure. Supplies were down, communication channels were scrambled, and their once precise maneuvers had been left in disarray. The plasma displays flickered with the new intel. The alien fleet was visibly weakening, but their resolve remained unbroken. The larger vessels, still largely intact, had begun to reorganize, their weapons now targeting Earth's smaller, more agile ships. The Council's aggression had not yet abated. They were still a threat, still calculated in their approach. Walker took a deep breath. "They're regaining control. We can't let them recover. We need to double down, strike while their defenses are still in disarray." Varric's brow furrowed. "How do you suggest we do that? They're regrouping. If we push too hard, we expose ourselves." Walker's eyes never left the display. He traced the movements of the alien ships, calculating their next move. The Council was in a corner, but they still had strength left, enough to retaliate, to counter Earth's aggressive tactics. Walker leaned forward, tapping a few commands into his console. The data streamed in front of him, providing a new map of the battlefield, the alien fleet's weakened points coming into focus. "We don't go head-to-head," Walker said, his voice colder now, more controlled. "We attack their command structure again. This time, we make sure they can't recover. We hit their power grid, cut off their communications for good. If we break their nerve centers, we break their will to fight." Varric hesitated for a moment. "Are we sure about this?" "It's a calculated risk. Their fleets are still too close for comfort." "They won't expect us to attack again," Walker said, his voice firm. "They'll think we're conserving energy. We'll catch them off guard. And then, when they're disoriented, we push in with everything we've got." The crew worked in synchronized haste, preparing for the next wave of action. Walker's plan was simple but ruthless. Earth's smaller, faster ships would move to intercept the Council's secondary fleets, drawing them away from their command vessels. Meanwhile, Earth's largest ships, still holding back, would target the alien command stations directly. The goal wasn't just to damage, it was to completely destabilize the structure of the enemy's fleet. "Move the decoys into position," Walker ordered, his eyes narrowing as the new plan began to take shape. "We need them to think we're divided. Let them chase shadows." Varric watched as the decoy ships launched, mimicking the signals of Earth's more vulnerable craft. They shot into the distance, weaving between the massive alien vessels like fish darting through a predator's grasp. The Council's fleets took the bait, beginning to fragment and chase after the false targets. The real strategy was now in motion, with Earth's best ships moving toward the heart of the Council's command structure. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut through. The officers watched the plasma displays, their eyes darting back and forth as the enemy ships split apart, drawn into the decoys. Then, without warning, the first plasma burst erupted from Earth's command ships. The shockwave rattled the walls of the station, the tremor vibrating through the floor. The alien fleet's shields flared under the pressure, but the force was too much. The ion beams blasted through their defenses, striking one of the command vessels. The explosion sent a pulse of light across the darkness of space, momentarily blinding the laser plasma displays. "Direct hit," Varric muttered, his fingers flying across the control panel. "We've cracked their shields. They're disorganized." Walker nodded, but his face remained focused, calculating. The first strike had landed, but it wasn't enough to break the Council's forces. He knew that, The real test was still ahead. "They're countering," one of the officers reported. "They've sent reinforcements. They're adapting faster than we expected." "Don't let them recover," Walker replied, his voice tightening. "We need to move in now, while their command is still fractured. Prepare the second wave, full power to the ion cannons." As Earth's remaining forces closed in, Walker's mind worked through the strategies like an intricate puzzle, piecing together the battlefield, calculating risks and rewards with every passing second. The next move had to be flawless. There was no room for error. The alien ships, now vulnerable, were still attempting to reorganize, trying to return to formation, but they couldn't act fast enough. Earth's fighters, faster and more agile, moved in for the kill. The ion blasts struck again, this time with more intensity, and the Council's main fleet was torn apart, piece by piece. "They're breaking," Varric said, his voice tight with disbelief. Walker's gaze never wavered. "We're not done yet. Push forward, take them out now while they're still reeling." The final phase of the operation began. Earth ships surged forward with renewed fury, their cannons firing relentlessly. The Council's secondary fleets were scattered, unable to mount a coordinated defense. The once proud alien warships were now drifting aimlessly, their engines sputtering, their crews scrambling to understand what had happened. On the plasma displays, the positions of the remaining Council forces dwindled rapidly. Earth ships pushed them further back, striking where they were weakest. The movement was calculated, each hit pushing the Council closer to total collapse. Varric's voice broke through the chaos. "It's almost over." Walker didn't respond immediately. His eyes scanned the screen again, confirming the final movements. The alien ships, battered and broken, were finally retreating. Earth's forces had done the impossible. They had shattered the Galactic Council's dominance, forcing them to retreat with their tails between their legs. But as the battle wound down, a strange feeling lingered in the air. The war had been won, but Walker knew the cost. They had achieved victory, yes, but it wasn't without sacrifice. The future of the galaxy now lay in Earth's hands, and with that responsibility came uncertainty. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. "Secure the perimeter," Walker said, his voice now calm but carrying the weight of a man who had seen the aftermath of destruction. "We hold this position." Earth had triumphed, but the true impact of this victory had yet to be fully understood. There was still much to rebuild, and the galaxy's power dynamics had shifted irrevocably. As Earth's forces stabilized their control, Walker turned to Varric, his eyes steely and resolute. "We've set a new course," Walker said, his voice firm, "and this galaxy will never be the same again." The battle was over, but the war had left a lasting scar on the galaxy. The Council, once a titan of the stars, was now in disarray, its forces scattered across the cold, silent void. The wreckage of their once mighty fleet drifted like forgotten relics, a testament to their overconfidence, their underestimation of humanity. Walker stood in the command center, his gaze fixed on the plasma displays, watching the last remnants of the alien retreat. They were broken, their defenses shattered, and for the first time in millennia, the balance of power had shifted in favor of Earth. But as the battle died down, a strange heaviness settled in the air. The victory was undeniable, but the price of that victory loomed over Walker, hanging like a shadow. The cost had been immense, not just in lives lost, but in the untold damage to the galaxy's structure. Earth had struck a blow to the Council, but the power vacuum left in its wake was a different kind of threat, a different kind of responsibility. The room was still, the sound of people moving in the background muted by the weight of their thoughts. Varric stood beside Walker, his eyes scanning the screens, his brow furrowed. They had won. They had decimated an empire. Yet something was missing. The air was heavy, thick with the realization that their triumph, as sweet as it was, had not answered every question. "What now?" Varric's voice was quiet, but it carried the gravity of a man who had seen everything change in the blink of an eye. Walker turned, his eyes catching Varric's for a long moment. His expression was unreadable, but behind the calm facade was the weight of 1,000 decisions that had led to this moment. 1,000 lives lost, 1,000 sacrifices made. "What now?" Walker repeated the question softly, his gaze shifting toward the heads-up display. The Earth forces were moving to secure the galaxy, to establish new peacekeeping boundaries. But there was no illusion here. The galaxy wasn't going to simply bend to Earth's will. There were factions, ancient enemies, and new forces waiting to rise. The vacuum would not remain empty for long. "We rebuild," Walker said, his voice low, steady, but with an edge of certainty that cut through the tension. "We rebuild what they took from us, and we protect what's ours. We hold what we've won, and we make sure they never forget that humanity doesn't just survive, it thrives." A shiver ran down Varek's spine, not from fear, but from something deeper. It was the same feeling that had gripped him when the first ion cannon had fired, the moment when they realized Earth was not just another species to be dominated, it was a force to be reckoned with. Walker's words weren't just a command, they were a declaration. Varek nodded, his eyes never leaving the displays. "We've become the guardians now. We hold the line." For a moment there was silence, the kind that filled a room with the weight of history, the kind that only comes when something fundamental has changed, when the world as it was ceases to exist and a new future begins to take shape. Then Walker spoke again, his voice cutting through the silence, sharper than before. "The Council thought we would be easy to subjugate. They thought we would bow down just like all the others who came before them. But we're different. Earth is different." His words lingered in the air, a quiet defiance that echoed through the room. "We're not just survivors," Walker continued, his gaze intense, unwavering. "We're builders, creators, fighters. We don't just adapt, we evolve. We don't just take what's given to us. We take what we want. We shape the future. And if anyone doubts that, if anyone tries to challenge us, they'll learn the hard way what happens when you mess with humanity." The finality in his tone was chilling. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of Earth, and now they would bear witness to its rule. The title that the Council had once held was no longer theirs to wield. Earth would not be a passive player in the galactic arena. Earth would lead. Varek took a deep breath, his gaze turning outward, away from the displays. His eyes drifted to the distant stars, to the darkness beyond the light of their home planet. There was a deep, profound understanding in his gaze now. Earth had crossed the threshold, and there was no turning back. They had tasted power, tasted victory, and now it was theirs to keep. "Humanity is not just a footnote in the history of the stars," Walker said, his voice steady, as if he were stating a fact of nature. "We are the future, and that future starts now." The words hung in the air like a weight. They were not just words of victory, they were words of a new era. Humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as an afterthought, but as a force that would no longer be ignored, no longer be underestimated. "Are you sure about this?" Varek asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He wasn't questioning the victory, but the magnitude of the task ahead. "This isn't just about fighting anymore. It's about controlling a galaxy that's never known peace. Are we ready for that?" Walker turned, his eyes narrowing as he met Varek's gaze. There was no fear there. There was only resolve. "We've always been ready," Walker said, his voice low but filled with a quiet power. "They never knew who we were, but they know now, and we won't let them forget." Varek stood in the silence that followed, a quiet understanding between them. They had won, not just the war, but the right to shape the future. And as they stood together, watching the displays fill with data, new communications from distant sectors, requests for negotiations, pleas for peace, the realization settled in. The Council was no longer the ruler of the galaxy. It was Earth. The galaxy had been forever changed by the actions of humanity. The Council had underestimated them. They had believed humanity would crumble under pressure. They had thought Earth would be just another footnote in the pages of galactic history. But Earth had risen, and now it was not only surviving, it was thriving. And this new chapter in the galaxy's story? It would be written by the hands of humankind.